3 days after the incident, Lauren received the first text. It was from an unknown number, just 4 words that made her blood run cold. "You didn't shoot alone." The text arrived while she was at the police station, giving her third statement to Internal Affairs, repeating the same version of events her fragmented memory could reconstruct. But something was wrong, and it wasn't just the gaps in her recollection. Detective Marcus Chen, in charge of the internal investigation, had that look Lauren knew well, the same one she used when she knew a suspect was lying. But this time, she was the suspect. Chen slid a series of photographs across the cold metal table, images of the crime scene that looked different from what she remembered. The teenager's body was positioned strangely, almost theatrically, with his right arm extended toward an object that glowed in the forensic flash. "Do you remember seeing this in his hand, Officer Vega?" Chen asked, pointing to what appeared to be an open pocket knife. Lauren frowned. Her memory lingered on a metallic glint. Yes, but something smaller, less defined. Maybe car keys, maybe a cell phone with a chrome case, but a pocket knife. That image didn't fit the mental puzzle she'd been trying to piece together for days. I'm not sure," he admitted, hating the uncertainty in his own voice. "It happened so fast." Chen made a note, and Lauren realized that every word of hesitation was being documented, filed away as evidence of his mental instability, or worse, his deception. The second message arrived the same day, this time with a photo attached. It was a grainy image, clearly taken from a security camera, showing a hooded figure approaching the crime scene about 20 minutes before the official forensic team arrived. The message simply said, "They planted it. You know it." Lauren tried to trace the number, but it had been deactivated. She tried to enlarge the photo, looking for details that might identify the mysterious person, but the quality was deliberately poor. Someone wanted her to know about the manipulation, but they didn't want to be identified. The question that haunted her was simple. Why would someone do this to her? The answer began to form when she discovered that 3 security cameras in the area had malfunctioned at the exact time of the incident. 3 different cameras from independent systems, all failing simultaneously. The statistical odds were astronomical. Someone with access and technical expertise had orchestrated a deliberate digital blackout. But who? And more importantly, why? Lauren's investigation into her own investigation led her to old case files. She discovered that the teenager she had allegedly shot, 17-year-old Marcus Rodriguez, was not just another young man lost on the streets. His father, Diego Rodriguez, had been a police informant in a drug trafficking operation that had gone spectacularly wrong 6 months earlier. 3 corrupt officers were exposed, millions of dollars in seized drugs disappeared, and Diego was found dead in a ditch a week after testifying. The case had been dismissed due to lack of evidence, but Lauren discovered that one of the officers involved, Sergeant Ray Morrison, was still active in the department. Even more disturbing, Morrison was scheduled for the night shift in the exact area where the incident with Marcus had occurred. The third message arrived with GPS coordinates and a time, Pier 47 midnight. "Come alone or the truth dies with you." Lauren knew it was a trap, but she also knew it was her only chance to find out who was behind the dark game that had turned her life into a nightmare. On the abandoned pier, under the dim light of the half-functioning streetlights, Lauren spotted a familiar figure waiting in the shadows. It was Jake Sullivan, a forensics technician she'd known for years, but this time he wasn't wearing his official uniform, and his hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette. "I didn't want any part of this, Lauren," he said, avoiding looking at her directly. "But they have pictures of me, things that could destroy my family." Jake revealed that Morrison and 2 other senior officers had orchestrated the entire scheme. They knew that Marcus Rodriguez was investigating his father's death on his own, gathering evidence that could reopen the case and expose the web of corruption that extended far beyond the original 3 officers. The pursuit Lauren initiated that night was no coincidence. Morrison had called in an anonymous tip about an armed and dangerous young man in the area, knowing Lauren would be responding. The plan was simple: use Lauren as the unwitting instrument to permanently silence Marcus, and then manipulate the evidence to make it appear as a legitimate case of justified use of force. "They planted the knife later," Jake confessed, his words tumbling out. "Morrison arrived on the scene first, said he was protecting the integrity of the evidence until forensics arrived. When we arrived, the knife was already there. I photographed everything as I found it, but I knew something was wrong." Lauren felt her world crumble around her. Not only had she been manipulated into committing an act that would destroy her conscience forever, but now she was discovering that she might not have actually pulled the trigger. The 4th message, which arrived while she was still processing Jake's confession, confirmed her worst fears. "Morrison was with you that night. Check the ballistics. Check the angles. You didn't kill that boy." The first video appeared on Twitter at 6:23, the morning after meeting Jake at the pier. Lauren was drinking her first coffee in 3 days when her phone began vibrating incessantly. It was her sister Elena, her voice thick with panic. "Lauren, you need to see this, now!" The video, filmed from an angle Lauren couldn't identify, showed the final moments of the chase. The quality was grainy, likely recorded from a distant window, but a uniformed figure, clearly her, could be seen pointing a gun at the teenager. The audio was distorted, but the words "don't move" were audible. What the video didn't show was Morrison positioned behind a patrol car, also with his gun drawn. Within 2 hours, the video had been shared 50,000 times. The hashtag #JusticeForMarcus began trending nationally. Lauren watched in mesmerized horror as her life was dissected by millions of strangers who were absolutely certain of her guilt, based on 43 seconds of dimly lit footage. Truthseeker 2024 posted, "Another killer cop. When will we stop letting these uniformed thugs kill our children?" ACAB, Justice for Marcus. Mama3 replied, "This kid had his whole life ahead of him. 17 years old, 17, and this murderer is probably getting paid vacation. Rotten system. Faucis defund the police." Lauren tried not to read, but it was like trying not to look at a car accident. Each comment was a stab at her already fractured sanity. What was worse was that, without the full context of Morrison's conspiracy, the comments weren't entirely wrong. Based on the publicly available facts, she truly sounded like a police officer who had used excessive force against a minor. Investigative reporter Sarah Chen, no relation to Internal Affairs Detective Marcus Chen, showed up at Lauren's door at 7:30 a.m. Lauren recognized the face from the local news, but this time Sarah wasn't in the polished TV studio, but standing on Lauren's porch with a camera and a cameraman. "Officer Vega, can you comment on the allegations that you used unnecessary force against Marcus Rodriguez?" The question came before Lauren had even fully processed that she was being filmed live. "The public has a right to know if you feel remorse for the death of a child." Lauren closed the door without answering, but the damage was done. The 5-second clip of the killer cop refusing to answer questions aired on the noon news and went viral before dinner. Every frame of her exhausted face, every shadow beneath her sleepless eyes, was analyzed as evidence of guilt by online courts. Her personal Instagram account, which she rarely used, was overrun with thousands of angry comments. Old photos of Lauren smiling at family barbecues were recontextualized as evidence of her psychopathic nature. A photo of her hugging her 5-year-old nephew sparked comments about her being a danger to children. The department attempted to enforce damage control by placing Lauren on administrative leave, but this only fueled more speculation. Why put someone innocent on leave? Online commenters asked. Clearly they know she's guilty. 2 days after the viral video, Lauren tried to go out to buy basic groceries. She was recognized at the supermarket. A middle-aged woman approached her in the cereal aisle and screamed, "Murderer! You killed a child!" Others began filming with their cell phones. Lauren abandoned her cart and ran to her car, but videos of the supermarket confrontation were already online before she got home. The psychological pressure was unbearable. Lauren began to question her own memories not only of the incident, but of her entire career. Was she truly the compassionate officer she believed herself to be, or were the online comments revealing a truth about herself that she had denied? The line between reality and public perception began to blur in her exhausted mind. Meanwhile, the official investigation continued its slow and methodical course. Detective Marcus Chen, the real one, not the reporter, continued collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, and analyzing forensic data, but his careful work was overshadowed by the media circus that had engulfed the case. Chen knew the ballistics would take weeks to complete. Witness interviews required time to locate people and schedule formal depositions. Reviewing the area's working security cameras, those that hadn't mysteriously malfunctioned, demanded hours of frame-by-frame review. Real justice required patience, something the digital age had made a rare commodity. But the internet didn't wait for official proceedings. The internet had judged Lauren guilty in real time, based on incomplete evidence and distorted context. The court of public opinion had convened, deliberated, and reached a verdict in a matter of hours, not months. Lauren received the 5th mysterious message on a particularly brutal morning, when a group of protesters had gathered outside her house with signs showing Marcus Rodriguez's smiling face next to photos of her with the word "killer" scrawled across them. "The truth is in the ballistics. Chen is close to finding out. Morrison knows it. Beware." The message was accompanied by a photo that made Lauren's stomach churn. It was Morrison exiting a building she recognized as the city's forensics lab. He was carrying a black briefcase and looking over his shoulder like someone who knew he was doing something wrong. Lauren realized that Morrison wasn't just manipulating crime scene evidence, he was actively interfering with the ongoing investigation. While the public was tearing her apart based on incomplete information, the real culprit was orchestrating a campaign to ensure the truth never came to light. The irony was cruel. The same public demanding justice for Marcus Rodriguez was unwittingly protecting his true killers through their thirst for media revenge. Lauren had become the perfect scapegoat, a distraction that allowed the real criminals to operate in the shadows while the spotlight of public outrage blinded her. But Lauren now knew the truth, even if she couldn't prove it yet. The question was, could she survive the virtual lynching long enough to expose the real conspiracy, or would she be destroyed by the very justice Marcus Rodriguez deserved? Lauren could no longer distinguish between the sound of gunshots and the roar of cars backfiring on the street. Every bang, no matter how innocent, sent her diving under the kitchen table, her heart racing at 180 beats per minute. It was the 14th day since the incident, and her body had become a minefield of hyperactive reflexes she couldn't control. The bathroom mirror had become his enemy. The woman staring back was not the officer Lauren Vega he had sworn to protect and serve 5 years ago. She was a stranger with deep purple circles under his eyes, disheveled hair, and a constant tremor in her hands that turned simple tasks like brushing his teeth into an epic battle against his own motor skills. Sleep had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus Rodriguez's face, but the image constantly shifted like a faulty film. Sometimes he held a pocket knife, sometimes a cell phone, sometimes his hands were empty. In some dreams, he was older, bearded, with Diego Rodriguez's eyes begging for justice. In other nightmares, he was a 10-year-old crying for his mother. Worse still, Lauren had begun to question not just that night, but her entire career. How many times had she used unnecessary force without realizing it? How many times had her interpretation of a situation been distorted by stress and adrenaline? Every arrest she had made over the years was turned over in her mind as potential evidence that maybe the online comments were right. Maybe she really was the monster they said she was. The paranoia started small, like an itch she couldn't scratch. Lauren noticed the same grey car had driven past her street 3 times one morning. Coincidence, she told herself. But when she saw the same vehicle in the supermarket parking lot and then at the pharmacy where she picked up the anti-anxiety medication her doctor had prescribed, the coincidence turned into certainty. Someone was watching her movements. But who? Morrison, trying to assess if she'd discovered anything. The protesters who gathered daily outside her home. Reporters looking for more sensational footage. Or was it just her fragmented mind creating connections where none existed? Elena tried to intervene in the 3rd week, appearing at the door with shopping bags and motherly determination. "You can't go on like this," she said, watching Lauren jump violently as the coffee maker made its normal end-of-cycle noise. "When was the last time you showered? Ate a full meal?" Lauren couldn't remember. Time had become a liquid soup where days blended into nights, and meals were replaced by handfuls of crackers eaten straight from the box. She had lost 20 pounds, and her clothes hung on her like rags on a scarecrow. "They're watching me," Lauren whispered to Elena, pointing discreetly at the window. "The grey car. It's been there for 2 hours." Elena looked outside and saw no grey car. There was only Mrs. Patterson, the 80-year-old neighbor, watering her begonias as she had done every morning for 20 years. "Lauren, honey, there's no grey car," Elena said gently, but Lauren saw the worry growing in her sister's eyes. It was the same look she'd seen on her colleagues' faces when they thought a suspect was mentally unstable. Now she was on the other side of that look. The mysterious messages had stopped arriving, and their absence was almost worse than the disturbing revelations they contained. At least when she received the cryptic clues, Lauren felt someone was on her side, that there was an objective truth waiting to be discovered. Now in the digital silence, she began to question whether the messages had been real or the product of her failing mind. She checked her phone obsessively, reviewing her message history to confirm they actually existed. The grainy photos, the peer coordinates, the Morrison revelations, it was all there, archived in digital memory. But her confidence in her own perception had been so eroded that even tangible evidence seemed suspect. Lauren began making lists, facts she knew to be true, her name, her address, her age. Then facts about that night she could objectively confirm, the time of the call, 9:47 p.m., the location, the intersection of Maple and 5th Streets, the weather, light rain. But the more she tried to catalogue her memories, the more slippery they felt, like trying to grasp water with your hands. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon when Lauren was obsessively organizing her lists for the 10th time that day. She heard the unmistakable sound of breaking glass coming from the kitchen. Her police training kicked in instantly. Someone had broken into her home. Lauren grabbed her service weapon, which she kept in the nightstand drawer, and moved carefully up the stairs. Her heart was pounding so hard, she was certain any intruder could hear it. Every shadow was a potential threat, every creak of the ancient floorboards evidence of hostile movement. Arriving in the kitchen, he found the broken glass, a glass that had fallen from the sink when the poorly stacked dishes lost their balance. There was no intruder, there was no threat, just the debris of his paranoia manifested in shards scattered across the linoleum. Lauren sat on the kitchen floor among the broken glass and cried for the first time since it all began. Not just silent tears of stress, but deep, animalistic sobs that seemed to come from some primal place deep within her chest. She wept for Marcus Rodriguez's death, for the destruction of her own life, for the family she had lost contact with out of shame and fear. But mostly she mourned the loss of her own mind. The Lauren Vega who had graduated from the academy with honors, who had helped elderly people cross busy streets and comforted lost children in shopping malls, was disappearing piece by piece. In her place was a paranoid stranger who saw conspiracies in parked cars and threats in falling glasses. The phone rang while she was still sitting among the broken pieces. It was Jake Sullivan, and his voice was urgent. "Lauren, you need to leave this house now. Morrison knows we talked. They're coming for you." For the first time in weeks, Lauren wondered if her paranoia had been justified all along. The grey car Elena couldn't see. Was it because it had driven off before she looked? The strange noises at night she'd attributed to stress. Was someone really watching her house? The line between sanity and paranoia had become so blurred that Lauren could no longer distinguish between real threats and those created by her fractured mind. But one thing was clear. Real or imagined, the threat was coming, and she had to decide if she still had the strength to fight back, or if she should simply surrender to the chaos her life had become. Lauren was stuffing clothes into a backpack when she heard cars pulling up in front of her house. They weren't the usual protesters or opportunistic reporters. The sound was different, more coordinated, more menacing. She peeked through the curtain and saw 3 vehicles strategically positioned, blocking all escape routes. Morrison stepped out of the first vehicle, accompanied by 2 officers Lauren didn't recognize. The phone vibrated. A message from Jake. "Back exit. Neighbor's fence. Now." Lauren grabbed her backpack and gun, instinctively moving in the stealth mode her training had engraved in her muscle memory. She slipped out the back door and climbed the wooden fence that separated her backyard from the vacant lot behind the house. Her hands were shaking, but she managed to move silently through the shadows until she found Jake waiting in a dark van. "Drive," she said, getting into the vehicle. Jake slammed his foot on the accelerator, and they disappeared into the night before Morrison realized the house was empty. "I have everything," Jake said, handing Lauren a thick manila envelope. "Ballistics, angle analysis, photos of the original scene before the manipulation. Morrison wasn't just your partner that night. He orchestrated the whole thing." Lauren opened the envelope with trembling hands. The first photos showed the scene exactly as she remembered. Marcus Rodriguez lying on the ground, but without anything in his hands. The next photos, taken 20 minutes later, showed the same body, but now with the pocket knife planted near his right hand. "But here's the kicker," Jake continued, pointing to a series of ballistic diagrams. "The angle of the bullet that killed Marcus doesn't match his position that night. The trajectory indicates the shot came from about 10 meters to his right, behind the patrol car where Morrison was positioned." Lauren studied the diagrams, her mind finally beginning to process clearly for the first time in weeks. "So I never shot." "Oh, you did," Jake replied grimly. "But your bullet hit the asphalt 10 feet in front of Marcus. It was Morrison's shot that killed him." The revelation hit Lauren like a punch in the gut. Morrison had used the sound of her gunshot as cover to execute Marcus, knowing that in the confusion of the moment, she would automatically assume his bullet had been fatal. The guilt that had consumed her for weeks was based on a carefully orchestrated lie. "Why was Marcus being chased that night?" Lauren asked, even though she already knew the answer. Jake handed over more documents. "He wasn't running from a crime. He was running to a date. Look at this." It was a series of printed emails, all addressed to an investigative journalist at the Washington Post. Marcus had spent months gathering evidence about the corruption ring that had killed his father, and he was ready to hand it over. Morrison got the tip about the meeting. Jake explained. He knew that if Marcus spoke to the press, not only would the 3 original officers go down, but a dozen other senior officers would as well, including Deputy Chief Harrison. Lauren felt the puzzle coming together in her mind. The conspiracy was far larger than she had imagined. Marcus Rodriguez wasn't just the son of a dead informant. He was the key to exposing decades of systemic corruption that extended to the highest levels of the department. "Morrison used me," she murmured, reality finally penetrating through the haze of guilt and paranoia. "He knew I was scheduled to respond to that call. He knew I would follow protocol and shoot if I felt threatened. And when you missed the shot, he improvised. He killed Marcus and planted the evidence to make it look like self-defense." Jake stopped the van at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. "But now we have proof. We can expose all of this." Lauren looked at the evidence spread across her lap. Ballistics analysis, undoctored photos, emails from Marcus to the journalist, call records proving Morrison's coordination. It was enough to clear her name and expose the conspiracy that had cost 2 lives, Marcus Rodriguez's and in a way her own. But she also knew that Morrison and his accomplices wouldn't let this evidence see the light of day without a fight. The truth came at a price, and Lauren was finally ready to pay it, no matter the cost. The real war was just beginning. If you're as invested as Lauren in the search for the truth behind this conspiracy, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any details of the next cases we'll uncover together. Because, as Lauren discovered, the truth always comes to those willing to seek it.